What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday to you. Welcome to episode 81, ochenta en uno of Stir Crazy, our unfiltered, unscripted take of news and politics here on the Real News Network. It's live, baby. This is a live show. Anything can happen. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Thank you guys for joining us here on a Tuesday. We have a full slate in front of us. Obviously, the talk of the nation really has been 2/3-fold. The shootings well, not killing, thankfully, of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, that horrifying video which showed police shooting him his father says that he was shot 8 times in the back while his children looked on, stemming from an incident that from all accounts didn't have anything to do with him. And yet here he is, a victim of police violence. Also in Lafayette, Louisiana, the case of Trayford Pellerin, the 31-year-old man who was also shot and tragically murdered by police, shot in the back as he was walking into a store. Police, from the video that I saw, and trust me, we will not be showing those videos. Those videos are traumatizing and not for the proper context, I think, of this program. But I'm assuming that a lot of you out there have already seen these videos. But this video of Mr. Pellerin in Louisiana, he was walking away from police and they shot and killed him. So the issue clearly is not whether individual officers will be held accountable, whether or not they will be charged and prosecuted. It's the fact that policing in America is exactly this. It is where police feel entitled and completely justified to shoot either unarmed people or people who are walking away from them to kill. And whether or not our politicians, namely the people who are vying to be president, incumbent Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden, have the moxie to do what it takes to reform police with any substantive changes, but it doesn't look like that's the case. But we're going to talk about the RNC looking a whole lot like a Klan rally. I don't think that's hyperbole to say that. It was a show coming out of Charlotte, North Carolina, where Donald Trump is set to address his caucus all 4 nights, which is pretty interesting. So we're going to get into all that. Of course, we definitely want to hear from you in the comments and in the chat. If you're on Periscope, what's up? Appreciate y'all checking us out on Twitter. Now to bring in our fantabulous panel. We've got a good one for you today. We are joined today by Neill Franklin. Neill is the executive director, for Law Enforcement Action Partnership. We're also joined with an investigative journalist and co-host and producer of the Police Accountability Report, Stephen Janis. And of course, friend of the show, all the way from the ATL, political consultant and commentator, Marcus Ferrell. Gentlemen, thank you all for being here with us on a Tuesday. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Tragically, the first place we're going to start, guys, is the incidents in both Kenosha and Lafayette. I don't want Trayford Pellerin's name to go unrecognized in the course of this latest events that have had people taken again to the streets, tearing shit up, turning shit over, setting shit on fire, as they are justifiably doing so out of anger, rage, frustration, all of that. I want us to go to a local report coming out of Kenosha, Wisconsin. Again, I'm not going to show the video. I'm assuming everybody has seen the video, but it's too much. I can't deal. So let's take a look at that first clip. This is from WISN 12 News, giving us I think this was from this morning or late last night, talking about the latest incidents happening in Kenosha. Let's take a look.
Has escalated within the last 30 minutes or so. Again, this is a garbage truck once again on fire in front of the courthouse. The scene here escalating within the past 90 minutes. As you see out in the streets, numerous protesters in a standoff with police on the other side of that garbage truck trying to disperse the protesters with that 8 o'clock curfew. They have used flashbangs. They have used tear gas on numerous occasions. We received the brunt of that on at least 2 occasions. They've used rubber bullets. Still, though, these protesters protesters are here after a fair amount of warnings to disperse the area. I want to take a look at some video. This is within the past 30 minutes. First, you see this group of protesters. They are marching toward the courthouse. They, in fact, were marching throughout the city for about 2-3 hours earlier in the night. They then went in front of the courthouse and confronted police, and that's when another intense round of tear gas was dispersed. They fled the scene, but now some are coming back at this hour. Just some other video earlier in the night. This was at about 8:30 this evening. For about 30 minutes or so after the 8 p.m. curfew, there were a number of sheriff's deputies, perhaps some National Guard members there as well. Protesters throwing bottles of water at them, some rockets perhaps. Let's come back out here live one more time. The fire here again escalating out on the street as we take a live look. This is in front of the courthouse tonight. People are dispersing. The fire now has just come into the street. We've seen people throw gas into another one of the fire trucks in an attempt to set that one on fire, but a volatile scene obviously at this point. We haven't seen any firefighters come. We did see a number of National Guard vehicles drive through the street. As you know, Governor Tony Evers deploying 125 National Guard members. We don't know their exact tactical situation.
Yeah, that report coming out of Kenosha where you hear that the governor has called in the Wisconsin National Guard to help quell the uprisings happening there in Kenosha. Now, Jacob Blake's father tells the Chicago Sun-Times that his son sustained 8 bullet holes in his back as a result of police officers' actions. He also tells the Chicago Sun-Times that it's not clear whether or not Jacob will walk again. He's currently paralyzed as a result of his injuries. We are definitely hoping that Jacob makes a full recovery in light of what he has suffered and what he has endured. But Neill, I want to start with you because, having been former law enforcement and having your experience, what Jacob's father told the press is that apparently there was an altercation happening between 2 women. Prior to when the now viral video begins filming, Jacob Blake was trying to break up an altercation with 2 people who are off camera. And yet somehow he ended up with the police following him. I mean, practically on his heels with the gun out the entire time, pointed right at his head. Why is it okay, or why is it so far in American policing, the brandishing of your weapon, even if you yourself are not in imminent danger, as a lot of police claim when they get involved in these deadly shootings, that they feared for their life. Clearly, this officer did not fear for his life. What was your take on what happened to Jacob Blake?
So first of all, I've been doing some research as much as I can with this case because it's still early, but I'm hearing so many different accounts of what happened and what led up to this shooting. The one that you just explained, that scenario. We're also hearing of a scenario where he was involved in a domestic dispute with someone and took their keys to their car and who knows what else. Another one that he had in possession a knife at the time he was confronted by the police officers. So we're still waiting to really find out what the facts are. And this is where it's difficult for us who are, somewhat disconnected from the case to find out what the truth is. So let's go with somewhat of what we know and what we can kind of see in the video. We see 3 police officers on the scene. We see Mr. Blake on the passenger side of the SUV. We see him appear from that side, walking around the front with 2 of the officers directly behind him, guns out. I know one at least had the gun out, the one who shot him. The other officer had moved toward the rear of the SUV. Now, even if let's start with first, if he did not have a knife, and this also addresses your question of officers just being so quick to pull their sidearms. This is a problem that we have, a systemic problem that we have all across the country with police being so quick to unholster that sidearm. We're dealing with a training issue we're dealing with a cultural issue. We're dealing with an issue of, and I'll say it, cowardness. As I talk to senior police officers who have been doing this work for a long time, and some who are retired, they know that the job is about, you know what, sometimes you got to go hands-on. Most of the time you got to go hands-on because that involves saving a life. That involves not escalating to the point of where you now have deadly force in front of you when you pull that firearm and now you feel committed to use it. We've got to get back to, or we have to find a way of getting these police officers to understand that, you know what, sometimes in doing this work, you're going to get bumps, you're going to get bruises, you're going to get scrapes, and maybe even a broken arm. But it's the safety of the people who you are serving that comes first, not you. And it's hard for this generation of police officers to get that and to understand that. I don't know how we're going to solve this issue of using excessive force and escalating to that place of deadly force so quickly. I don't know how we're going to get to resolving that or dealing with that other than deconstructing this current model of policing, which means a lot. It means literally a complete rebuilding of this whole policing structure, of this whole law enforcement structure. And then on the backside of that, policing is going to look a whole lot different. I don't think we're ready yet as a society to have no police. Obviously, that's the main goal. But we are at a place where we need to begin deconstructing police, and that will change the culture. I just think we're too far down this road in how we use force. What this current generation of police officers has been raised to do, to think, and how to behave, I just think it's going to take a complete deconstruction and rebuilding of it. It's very hard to explain what's going through the minds of these police officers at the time that they do it. It's just that they, and also obviously racism in this country is the foundation of it all, in my opinion, and the lack of concern and value of Black lives in this country by police officers and by others.
Stephen Janis, on the Police Accountability Report, you and host Taya Graham did a show about why do police keep shooting people in the back. And these two incidents that happened over the weekend with Mr. Blake, who by the grace of God survived 8 shots to the back. But tragically, Mr. Pellerin in Lafayette, Louisiana, lost his life as a result of being shot in the back by cops. Why do cops keep shooting people in the back? The gentleman from Atlanta was also shot in the back. Talk to us about what has your reporting found in this instance?
In one of our shows, we looked at this training manual and this training program called Killology, which has been used to some extent with police departments across the country. And it very much makes it seem like any sort of normal behavior is a predicate to violence. And it was very disturbing to go through the manual because the manual basically said, stretching in a certain way or looking both ways, or, it was almost like any type of behavior that you could imagine was indicative. And I think also, as people have, as this training showed in some of the videos we watched of the people who created this training, they take very isolated incidents. Obviously we know American police kill 20 times more people than are killed. Like, in other words, there are roughly 50 police shot, maybe less than that, maybe like 30 killed in every year, and 1,000 people are shot and killed by police. So it's completely disproportionate. But if you look at the training, you think that every person who, was in their car and looked down was ready to open fire. If I had read this training manual and didn't have the context of looking at the data and understanding it better, I think it's kind of training that makes you paranoid. And one of the more disturbing aspects of the manual is it showed how people's brains had been shaped by video games and it made people less able to handle, their emotions and made them more liable to use violence because of exposure to video games. So junk science, much of policing is driven by junk science and forensics. And this was just another example of it. So it basically was training police to think, set aside the point that Neill made about racism, just to think that any person that they encounter in any situation was capable of violence. And so, if this is the kind of training they have, I think it speaks to a lot of why police feel justified. And then, of course, they're not really held to much account. I mean, they just have a reasonable fear of their own lives. And then, of course, I think some of them really just want to shoot people. I'm sorry. I believe that they feel in some way it's rewarded. I mean, we have police in Baltimore who get paid extra money when they shoot people through the workers' comp system. So I think there's a big incentive. So those things combined, I think, make it very easy for police to shoot people in this country.
Marcus, what struck me about the video with Jacob Blake is that when he walked around the front of his SUV and the cop was right there on his heels like this, had the gun right at the back of his head, Jacob wasn't really paying that cop any attention. And his whole body language said to me that whatever this cop was talking about, it was not registering with Jacob, in the sense that Jacob knew, again, this is me projecting here, that he hadn't done anything wrong. He knew that they wasn't looking for him. He knew he had his kids in the car. According to the article from the Chicago Sun-Times, his dad said that was the day of his son's eighth birthday. So he was getting ready to get the kids together, go celebrate his son's birthday. So whatever the cops was talking at Yin Yang, he wasn't really paying no attention to it. And clearly he didn't think that he had done anything to warrant a gun being pulled on him, let alone being shot 7 to 8 times in the back. What did you take from the video of Mr. Blake?
I took that Timmy Tactical is going to Timmy Tactic, right? I took that, as Stephen said, these guys have been playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare and shit for their whole lives. I mean, we're in the first generation of professionals who grew up off of first-person shooters. So we're looking at a society that not only our police officers normally don't even live in the communities that they're policing. So so most likely you live in an all-white neighborhood. When you're, dealing with black folks and you don't have empathy. Second, you don't have the same kind of structure of understanding. And third, you're not nuanced enough to understand race. Police officers, they get their rocks off by this power of controlling another human being, but especially by the power of being able to control the big black villain. We've been villainized by police officers. I'm 260 pounds. So if a cop sees me, immediately is like, well, he's going to be a tough one to wrestle around with, so I might have to shoot him. That's how I think they think. So what do I take from it? I take it's a normalized action that, and I also agree that, there's a bunch of cowards in the police force. They're not heroes. They don't act like heroes. You know who are heroes? Firemen and EMTs, the motherfuckers that run up in burning buildings and take people out of them, in plus 200, 300 degree weather, right? Temperatures. That's a hero. A cop who shows up late, obviously, to an altercation and basically this situation, this brother was community policing himself. Right. If the stories that I hear are true and he actually stopped the fight. Right. That means that is almost tangible enough action for me to say defund the police. Why? Because a brother got out of his car and stopped the fight. So, I don't think we need to be throwing cash as Vice President Joe Biden says, throwing cash at these police departments, expecting them to reform. These police departments need to be defunded completely and shut down. And the last thing I want to say is, my cousin Jonathan Ferrell was shot and killed by a cop. Walter Scott years ago was shot in the back and killed in South Carolina by a cop. When you ask our families, what do we think about defunding the police? We're pretty much in unison. And I don't know Mr. Scott's family, and I don't know any of the families outside of a couple that I've organized around. But most of them say defund the police, right? They agree with that. The problem is that the police are targeting African Americans, and I'm going to say something a little controversial. If a Karen was killed, there'd be a Karen's law already.
I mean, I'm thinking of the white Australian woman who was shot and killed by a Minneapolis police officer who was of Somali descent. I mean, they put his ass in jail. Like I mean, that went without saying. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't even no hesitation of whether or not he was going to get charged and or convicted of killing that white woman. But in addition to Jacob Blake, as I said, Trayford Pellerin, 31 years old, of Lafayette, Louisiana, was also shot and killed this weekend, shot in the back by police. The video did go viral. A woman was recording it on Facebook. Again, I'm not going to show it, but basically it happened at a gas station or a convenience store, and he was walking away from police, trying to enter the convenience store when police shot him. It was unclear whether or not he was actually carrying a weapon, but when I say weapon, I mean knife, not like a gun. But by all accounts, at least by the video that had gone viral, he was walking away from cops, not towards them. And I wanted to check out this report from Louisiana, from KATC TV. That's okay. The video from Louisiana, from Lafayette, Louisiana, says credit KATC.
Things are much quieter now here in Lafayette after protesters took over several main roads, blocking them for hours. No justice! No justice! Protesters starting across the street from one police precinct. We're told that some of the police units behind the fence were hit with paintballs, and we're told some protesters were throwing rocks. It didn't take long, though, for police to move in to try and get the situation under control. Police deputies and Louisiana State Police on scene in riot gear gave the protesters who shut down Mall Street in Lafayette near the Northgate Mall a 10-minute warning to clear the streets or they would be arrested. Police extended that warning, but as you can see in this video, flares were used dispersing a smoke through the crowd. A good majority of the protesters did push back while others moved forward and some kicked the canisters. We did see at least 3 people get arrested on Mall Street. We spoke with Tara Laxey. She's a member of Unity 7. Her organization, very active in the community. She says she's heartbroken that a scene that has played out across the country is happening here in Lafayette. When Laxey heard the news of officers telling us some of their units were paintballed, she had this to say.
Well, if they have paintball marks on their cars are still going to run. We have a 31-year-old brother who had 11 bullets put into him last night. He'll never run again. His mother and father have to bury him. So you tell me what's more important. Do they not know how to be personable anymore? Can they not acknowledge the hurt and pain and the outcry of my community?
Community leaders are pleading for protesters to remain peaceful and not to destroy anything or resort to violence. One organizer says that this is a sad day for our community, saying it's time to come together, demand transparency, and fair and equal treatment for everyone. In Lafayette, Chris Welty, KATC TV3.
So the Lafayette Police Department has turned over this investigation to Louisiana State Police. The mayor-president of Lafayette, I have never heard of such a title. His name is Josh Guillory, according to the advertiser.com, has praised the police for their actions. He's also condemned protesters and also condemned the victim, saying that, quote, the victim was threatening as officers approached him. And again, I'm operating here off the assumption that many of you have seen this video. You have to go seek it out. I can't show it to you. It's too much. But Neill, I want us to circle back to a part of the conversation that we had earlier two things. Well, one, you said that old school cops knew that they had to knuckle up. They knew they had to at least fight, as opposed to these new cowards who will just pull out their guns and start shooting. But when it comes to the issue of non-compliance, like I feel like so many of these instances and these tragedies come from police saying that the person was not compliant. He was not following orders. I told them to stop. They refused to stop, even if they were walking away from the cops. What part about the police training says that it is okay to induce violence or to cause harm to someone who is not obeying orders, even if that person is not even physically in the officer's physical space or not posing an imminent threat to the officer?
So, even our laws and case law play a role here when it comes to police performing their duties when they have to make an arrest of somebody, right? The law gives them that latitude, gives them that authority to take whatever force is necessary to effect the arrest, right? And so we train to that. We're different than what we see in many of our other countries, like in Europe. In Europe, there are many times when the police confront someone who has a knife, or they may believe has a knife, or who actually does have a knife. But their training is very extensive, not just in physical skill sets, but in mental preparedness for dealing with that. It's not 6 weeks, it's not 6 months. It is a year or more in many cases of training, getting these officers prepared, for instance, to deal with someone that has a knife. And they're trained to do that without the use of a firearm, to do it as a team, to disarm someone. And you know what? And sometimes an officer might get cut, but they value life more than we do here in our systems here in the United States. We have to strive to get to a point of that. We've kind of regressed from that, is what I was saying about some of our old school police officers. We've gotten to a point where some of these cops are receiving this training, for instance, by this gentleman by the name, I use that term lightly, of David Grossman, where he's teaching, as we've heard earlier in this show here, training that is teaching these police officers that you don't even want to allow yourself to get hurt. First things first, you want to make it home at the end of your shift. Training that puts the safety and well-being of the police officer before anyone else. And that's not how it's supposed to be. So again, there's been so much of this training that has got us to this culture that we're now dealing with. And Marcus, you're right. We have cowards out there who are in the wrong damn profession, right? If you can't deal with it, go do something else. So it goes to making sure that we hire the right people. At one end of the spectrum, we got cowards that we're hiring. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got people who just want to, and I think, Stephen, you said this, who just want to shoot people, mainly Black people. Yeah. We got to find those level-headed folks in the middle. If we're going to have police in this country, we got to have these level-headed folks in the middle of that who we can give some really good training to and keep them in the right space when interacting with our people out in our community.
I mean, Stephen, there's so much talk about bad apples, right? And there's, it's so tempting to look at these individual incidents and say, oh, well, that was a bad cop. Or Derek Chauvin, who was accused of killing George Floyd. Oh, he was indicative of a bad cop. And the other co-defendants are, not representative of the whole of the police force. But there doesn't seem to be much consequence for bad policing, especially if there is an incident like this, or even, God forbid, before cell phone cameras were ubiquitous and the police officers were given basically carte blanche to kill people if they so chose to, without a whole lot of evidentiary pushback, I should say. I mean, what consequences are there for bad cops? Because this incident and incidents like it are not necessarily taken as bad policing by the police themselves. It's just one of those things that happen.
Well, having covered policing for such a long period of time, I think I've come to the conclusion that, policing just reflects the underlying values of our society. And since we are a country, as you can see and witness in the COVID crisis, that is willing to tolerate 178,000 deaths and not really make much of a stink about it, I think that, policing also, I think, has inculcated the same value of human life. Do you know what I mean? I mean, in this country, we just consider 1,000 people a year, the consequence of policing. And that really speaks to the underlying relationship between the economic structure and policing, which is what we try to emphasize in our show, the Police Accountability Report. I mean, policing, you can't defund the police until you defund the economic system, which it bolsters. And I would say the same for, you can't defund police until you defund racism in this country. I mean, if you look at a city like Baltimore, policing is an extremely profitable business, and it enforces social barriers that makes it very easy for a small group of people to make money off poisoning African-American people, off impoverishing African-American people, off of, having bad schools. It's all part of a ecosystem that reinforces itself. So of course, there's not going to be any consequences. We've had multiple efforts at reform. You will not reform policing in this country, nor will you hold anybody accountable until the underlying system of economics that really it is tied to and that it helps bolster is changed. And I think that's the problem. We just have a high tolerance for economic casualties, I guess is the best way to say it. And most of it, a lot of it is driven by racism, as you see in our city, where we poison children with lead, where we put people in jail who for years and decades who didn't commit a crime. So, we are an extremely cruel society. Policing reflects that. Police officers aren't going to be held accountable until that changes.
You guys, we have some couple of comments here from the comments. I'll start with regular in the comments in the chat. Paul X BSOG, he said, what do you call the defunding of the police? A good start. Yes, it is a good start. And another comment here. Interesting. Daniel Rivera. Politicians are not going to make a positive change in our lives. It's our responsibility. And Marcus, I want to play this clip from Joe Biden and his running mate, Kamala Harris. This was in advance of the weekend shootings of Mr. Blake and Mr. Pellegrin. But this is what he had to say when asked about how does he feel about defunding the police. Let's take a look at that, Dwayne.
President Trump says that you want to defund the police. Do you?
No, I don't. By the way, he proposes cutting $500 million out of local police support. Look, what the police need is first of all, there has to be national standards that in fact apply to every police department in the country. And that's what we're going to do. I don't want to defund police departments. Mm-hmm. I think they need more help. Mm-hmm. They need more assistance. And we have to make it clear that this is about protecting neighborhoods, protecting people, everybody across the board. So the only guy that actually put in a bill to actually defund the police is Donald Trump.
Robin Roberts there interviewing Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris for ABC News. Marcus, did you see Joe Biden damn near laugh in Robin Roberts' face when she asked him, Joe, what do you think about defunding the police? Oh, Robin, don't be silly. I'm not trying to defund the police. The police need more help, Marcus. And the counter that Donald Trump has also said that he intends to fund the police more. So who is lying, or are they both telling the truth that the police can expect blank checks from either a second Trump administration or a first Biden-Harris administration?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, if you look at the track records of both of our options, the police are looking pretty goddamn good right now when it was down to funding, right? And secondly, this is one of those moments where Joe Biden should be left in the basement. And I think Kamala Harris needs to be the person that's talking, because somebody with common sense should tell Joe, okay, Joe, there is this a big segment of progressives or people that have been marching on the streets that believe in defunding the police, even though, we've surrounded ourselves around with people who don't necessarily believe in funding and defunding the police, saying saying Donald Trump is going to do it is not the response, because hell, you're trying to drive blacks and Latinos in the streets to the Trump camp just by saying that alone. I mean, I know a lot of people whose whole political view is based off of defunding the police. I got something more important to say about this situation, and this is it. If you were a Democrat and you have done everything you possibly can to expect the black vote, you talk about the black vote, you hire token Negroes to come out and speak on your behalf over issues that you don't understand or you're not nuanced enough to understand. If you were a Democrat and you're talking about increasing the support of police departments right now, then you should go to hell. And I'll say that straight up. You should go to hell. You should go straight to hell. My family was affected by bad policing. There's somewhere around 60 to 70% of African-American adult males that have been targeted by bad policing. To say that you're not even willing to defund them or even have a conversation is not only a slap in the face, but it's ridiculous. And like we said before the show, we have folks like Jim Clyburn who are more than willing to get on television and say, we want the police, we need the police, and deliver whole states to a candidate. That's why I'm happy that there's a new generation of voters, and boomers are slowly going to pass away, because right now, the Cosby Show era, Bill Clinton, safety and cops, trickle down economics, strong on crime, tough on crime Democrat, they got to get the hell out the way, because they're dangerous for my own personal life, right? And so, like, when I say
they're saying that Jacob, that's exactly what he was doing, allegedly, getting out of his vehicle to try to break up this altercation between two women, doing the job of the police, basically, and he got
called him.
Someone did call him, but but also I think that we are so programmed to call the police, and I think there's a whole process of deprogramming that we have to do. Dwayne, I want you to go to that video. It says Gwinnett County, Georgia. I know a lot of people saw this video as well, where it's a black woman sitting on her porch or standing on her porch, and what has apparently happened before the video started rolling is that she was on her porch talking loud. On her porch, talking loud. Somebody called the police, and then, of course, things escalated. Let's look at that, Dwayne.
Don't care.
So we can talk if we want to.
You can go to
I'm not going nowhere. It doesn't matter. You're on our property. We did not call you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still right. I'm going to stand there until I want to. You're not
Black Lives Matter.
I'm not resisting you. You're not touching me.
You're under arrest.
613-10-3.
Black Lives Matter.
Come here.
Leave her alone.
You cannot let her be on the rest. Come on now. Come on now. Come on now.
Get on the ground right now. Taser.
Stop! What you doing?
Stay there, right? Stay there, Dre. Turn over right now. Put your hands behind the back. Turn over. Put your hands behind the back.
You finna get sued, sir.
Turn over. Put your hands behind the back. I will tase you again.
Call the police, mama. Call the police, mama.
Can I please get your name? Taser deployed.
Can I please
Turn
get
over.
your name?
Mama, Turn over.
Can I please get your name?
Now, Neill, you heard the victim there who was being tased, being assaulted by this police officer saying, call the police, mama. I mean, because who else are we going to call? Go ahead.
Right. We're programmed to. I have the question of, part that we didn't see and we don't know is, how did he get there in the first place?
Somebody called him.
Someone called him. And then when he starts to abuse that citizen, and so call the police. So we got to figure this out. We got to start putting processes and things in place within our communities so that we can handle our own business, right? So that we can intervene instead of someone calling 911, because we know what's going to happen, right? When we bring the police into our communities. So anyway, I just wanted to get that into the minds of people. So when those of you that are out there watching the show and who are listening, wherever you are, wherever you sit, what are you doing within your community, within your neighborhood, within your block to get this rolling, right? So that we're handling our own business within our homes and within our neighborhoods.
Kim, I want to just interject if I can. The officer's name was Michael Bongiovanni. I'm down here in Atlanta. He's been fired from the police department since this happened, right? And you got to understand something. Gwinnett County Police Department, like, first off, Atlanta is the home of the Red Dogs, right? And if you know anything about the history, and I'm gonna age myself by Outkast and Goody Mob used to bring up the Red Dogs all the time. They literally were just sort of jump out boys with badges. They literally would jump out of vans and kidnap you. Well, the jump out boys, they got disbanded, but these police officers literally got spread around the Fulton, Gwinnett County area. And you don't want to run into the Gwinnett County police at all if you're black. Like, they are the worst, right? And the irony is that Gwinnett is the fastest growing black county in America. So as that area diversifies, right, policing that's why voting is so important, because as that area diversifies, the white folks who left Atlanta from white flight who went up to Gwinnett County, now they want to have another version of white flight and get out of Gwinnett County and go even further out. And the cops are pressing down on Latino and black people in that county. So I just want to point out, like, the background of what's happening in Gwinnett County and around the nations. And it's also sort of like to keep the law and order and keep folks oppressed. These folks are going out of their way and distorting the view of law. And the last thing I want to bring up is cops are doing what this whole system was designed to do. If you think about the first traded commodity in America, that was slaves. Capitalism was slaves. And policing started from slave catchers, right? Like, modern policing started from slave catchers. And yes, even in the northern states, they had slave catchers, because once we were free, they would even bring us back. So when they gave those slave catchers badges, who were the criminals at the time? I want to bring that up because they are treating American citizens and black people the same way they treated them 200, 300 years ago, as slaves.
Incredible.
That's why I was saying
yes,
that basically policing in this country was never designed for the benefit of black folks. Point blank. That's another major reason for deconstructing what we currently have, the model we currently have, and reconstructing it from the community, from the neighborhood up. Community and neighborhood control of what lies on the other side of this deconstruction and reconstruction. So that the people truly have control over those who have that level of authority, whatever we want to call them, within our neighborhood.
Guys, I wanted us to take a quick look, and these are extremely quick clips. Dwayne, I want to play Trump first, followed by Senator Tim Scott. The first night of the Republican National Convention was last night. It was not an all virtual event like the Democratic convention had been. In fact, Donald Trump and Mike Pence addressed a room full of people in Charlotte, North Carolina. I guess because, Trump still doesn't believe in COVID-19. But this is what he had to very quickly say on the first night. I'm sure throughout the convention, he may bring up police again, because the law enforcement community has become a reliable base. And that is a group that he will gladly whistle his dog whistles loud, or the foghorn, or whatever kind of racial indicator to this group that Trump can pull off. But let's listen to Trump first, and then we'll go to Tim Scott.
We are going to fully fund law enforcement and hire more police.
In 1994, Biden led the charge on a crime bill that put millions of black Americans behind bars. President Trump's criminal justice reform law fixed many of the disparities Biden created and made our system more fair and just for all Americans.
When? when did that happen? Neill, did I miss it? Stephen Janis, you're back. I thought you had to leave, but I'm glad to see your face.
I do have to leave. I do have to leave. It's just my computer died. I felt badly that I just kind of disappeared, but I do.
Okay. Well, Neill and Marcus, hold tight, because Stephen, there was a question I wanted to ask you, and I thought we had lost you. So I wanted to bring it back, because when Neill talks about communities trying to keep police out in the first place, don't call the police to begin with. I know there are a number of programs in cities, including Baltimore. Is it the violence disruptors? Can you tell us about that?
Well, in Baltimore, we have Safe Streets, which has been expanded, which uses people or hires people who have relationships in the community to try to mediate disputes, and those programs have proved pretty effective. And, are much cheaper in reality than policing. But, obviously things like State Streets don't bolster the political economy that makes policing work. It doesn't put donations into politicians' pockets. It doesn't pay out pricey pensions to people who can retire when they're 43. And, it doesn't really create the law enforcement industrial complex. But they do, I think, there have been studies done by Johns Hopkins that have shown the efficacy of things like Safe Streets, and they can be more effective. But also Safe Streets has been controversial recently. One of the members of Safe Streets was arrested for drug dealing. But, in general, they have proven effective and have been seen as an alternative, and especially a much less expensive alternative than policing, and the ability for the community police itself, because Safe Streets employs people who live in the community, as opposed to Baltimore City Police, where 80% of the people in the Baltimore City Police Department live outside the city.
So has that program been funded? Does it struggle to achieve and retain funding by the city?
For years, it was funded primarily by grants, and the city refused to fund it directly. But I think in 2018, the state legislature passed a mechanism for funding, which expanded the program broadly. And so finally, after Freddie Gray and all the sort of calls for reform of the criminal justice system, the state stepped up and actually put some money. But for years, it was very difficult to fund it, because the mayor didn't want a succession of mayors. Well, Mayor Dixon did, but Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake didn't want to fund it directly and would rely primarily on grants, which was kind of shaky. So for years, I think there was a competition between the police department and the feeling that Safe Streets, if it was was effective, would threaten the primacy of the police department. And thus, it's been a difficult road. But for now, it's funded by the state. And I'm going to sign off. Okay.
Stephen Janis, investigative reporter, co-host of the Police Accountability Report, which airs right here on Thursdays at 9 p.m. on The Real News. Stephen, thank you. Thank you. Thank
you. Bye.
All right. So Neill and Marcus, y'all stuck with me now. Stephen can't save
So Kim, to pick up where Stephen left off just real quick, where he was talking about kind of like a little conflict here between the police and those members of Safe Streets, to the point that there were some police officers, like members of this gun trace task force, who were targeting members of the Safe Streets program. These are formerly incarcerated folks. We call them credible messengers, right? These OGs that come back into the community to reduce violence within the community by working with the young people in the community. So Safe Streets is that one program that was funded by, again, grants in the city, but we also had a program born right here in Baltimore on the east side, Rose Street program. Mr. C is the one who put that together and was running it, still running it. And unfortunately, homegrown programs like that have a very difficult time getting funding. And that's one of the areas where we need to shift police funding, into those types of programs, the homegrown programs like Mr. C's program, if you want to reduce violence in the city.
Marcus, there has been, as evidenced by Joe Biden's comments, that he has no intention. I mean, he laughed when she asked him, do you intend to defund the police? No, big smile. Like, no, don't be ridiculous, Robin Roberts. But it's not just Joe Biden. It's a collection of Democratic lawmakers, specifically mayors of large cities, like Chicago, like Seattle, and in Tampa, Florida. and pardon me, because I did not look and see what this woman's affiliation was, but the mayor of Tampa, along with the Tampa City Council, has recently announced their $1.2 billion city budget, where they have cut $0 from the police budget. And they have expressed the sentiment that they have no intention of defunding the police. And a lot of the requests and demands from activists in and around Tampa are falling on deaf ears when it comes to these politicians. I mean, there's not a political will to do this because for reasons, I would assume that some of these elected officials, these mayors and even governors, don't see the people in the streets as their constituents. Is that the same case where you are at in Atlanta with Keisha Lance Bottoms? Is she okay with cutting police, or she thinks that's a bad idea?
I haven't heard any solid policy from her on that. And to be quite honest with you, I would be surprised if she's cool with defunding the police. And essentially because if she comes out with a statement like, then she might not be welcome in the White House, right? Because, she wanted to be the vice president now, and listen, I stand with Keisha when it comes down to masks and the mandates that she's doing, the fight that she's had with Governor Kemp here. But, when it comes down to like defunding the police departments, those are like Mayor Castor in Tampa and so many Democratic mayors across the nation. The DLC tactic, the Democratic leadership tactics of tough on crime and early 90s policies, you got to understand that these politicians, these Democrats, grew up idolizing the Clintons and idolizing Biden and idolizing the tough on crime policies. They were put in these positions because there's still a otherness class-wise when it comes down to middle class and low and poverty-stricken African American families and people of color families in our inner cities. They don't see the humanity in these folks. The only time you'll see them come around some of these areas where they have over policing is when it's time for them to get elected, and then they roll out, their said favorite Negro or Latino, Latinx person, and then say he's been here all along, he's for us, and then they'll throw pastor a $20,000 check or something, or get their road rebuilt. The politics of defunding the police ties directly into the politics of crime and safety and making moderate white citizens in these cities feel comfortable and feel happy. I live in a gentrified area. I live in Old Fourth Ward, right? Martin Luther King's grave is footsteps away from my door, less than half a mile away from my door. And the neighborhood is a classically Black neighborhood, right? And I have many examples of community policing in the ungentrified parts. What's amazing is as the neighborhood grows and more white folks start moving into it, the amount of cops being called because the homeless man who's been homeless or an old Black man who just hangs out at the store who's been doing it for years is now getting taken away because there's no nuanced understanding of the neighborhood and the people that are within the neighborhoods. So, first, you can't believe anything Donald Trump or Tim Scott says about policing, except that they're going to end up like they did do something where they managed to get a couple of African-American brothers out of jail. But we're going to get the same kind of response on a national level. On a local level, we have to be daring and we have to be bold and we have to have city councilmen that are saying, okay, we got to do something different for our communities. This is why these down ballot races are so important. I really don't have nothing to vote for in Atlanta, Georgia, Kim. And what I mean by that is, I'm not excited about the Senate race down here with Ossoff, but I am excited about like some of the city council races and some of the down ticket races to make sure that the local folks who are actually talking about defunding the police get in there. And then Joe Biden might happen to get my vote while I was there. To be honest with you, I want to vote for Jamie Harrison in South Carolina anyway. But that's my thought process around these mayors in these Democratic areas.
From the comments, Zach Sherman says, policing was designed for the benefit of capital. And, when I look at some of these reports from local news agencies coming out of like Kenosha, for example. I mean, what led the morning news this morning in Wisconsin was all the businesses that have been burned and all the property that had been lost. Not the fact that there was a young man laying in the hospital with 8 bullets in his spine who may not walk again and who had to be, had his life was almost taken in front of his children. But the concern is the Capitol. And Neill, you know, we've seen this tremendous movement over the past several months since the murder of George Floyd, which seems so long ago now, right? People have been in the streets sustained for a while. And I do want us to look back at some of that footage, Dwayne, of some of the protest actions over the weekend, but in a second, because I mean, Neill, I'm looking at this defund the police movement and possibly abolish the police movement. And it kind of reminds me of like the legalization movement for marijuana that took decades, right? It took a long time for even decriminalization to come out of marijuana policies. And granted, it's not 100% legal. It's not federally legal. But weed has come a long way in the past 10 years or so. 10, 20 years from now, do you think we'll see similar movement in this particular struggle, in reallocating police dollars, in getting police out of communities and replacing them with a better community public safety option? What do you see this looking like in the next 20 to 30 years, possibly?
Yeah, so I think we will. It's like any harmful piece of public policy, which is the war on drugs, which is marijuana prohibition, which is a prohibition of other drugs too. It's a very harmful piece of public policy that was all about social control. We're dealing with similarly the same thing, a piece of public policy, policing within our within our justice system, which is harmful public policy. Again, as Marcus was saying earlier, you know, as we've been saying, it was never for the benefit of Black people. It was born out of slavery, slave patrols. So it has a rotten foundation. It is a rotten piece of public policy that is changing. It's going to have to change. Now, it's going to take a while. We're going to have some advancement and we're going to have some regression, back and forth. But eventually, keeping the pressure on, as we're seeing on the heels of George Floyd. And now with Mr. Blake, and let me tell you, there's going to be another, and there's going to be another, and it's going to keep adding the fuel to the fire of this dramatic reform that we need. And as was said earlier, we got a new generation of folks here coming about. So it eventually will change. It will evolve. There's going to be a lot of resistance on the political side. These mayors and governors and others and Biden who do not agree with defunding the police because they don't see it, they don't understand it, whatever the case may be. Again, understand this is a capitalistic society. It's all about money. So it's all about campaign donations. They don't see the people who are out there every day within our cities protesting as major contributors financially to their campaigns. That's what they see, and that's what they don't see. Who's contributing to my campaign? What is their position on this? What is their viewpoint on this? That's where I'm going to be, because unfortunately, these political campaigns now, for the most part, are still all about money, but that's changing too with a new generation of political leaders stepping forward. If we can keep that going forward, who are literally refusing to take corporate dollars and major campaign funds, and they're looking to the people for their support and for their votes. We can continue with that trend. We'll be successful with this, again, deconstructing of our current model of policing in this country.
Gentlemen, before we say goodbye, I wanted us to take a quick look, if we could, at some of the protest actions that happened over the weekend as news of the shooting of James Blake and Trayford Pellerin in Louisiana spread. 2 videos coming out of New York. One at night, the people are swarming the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's not the walking path side of the bridge, it's the traffic side of the bridge. And the other video, dayside, was protesters walking down 7th Avenue, calling for justice and police accountability. Let's take a look at those, Dwayne. Yes, and we definitely want to send solidarity out to everybody that has been in the streets for weeks now. Weeks, people. We have never seen anything like this sustained in this country for this long, where people have been out in the streets from coast to coast, from New York to Portland to Chicago to Florida to DC. They have remained in the streets. So we are going to see some movement happen. And I believe that we will win in this long fight. But I want to thank our guests today. Got to thank Neill Franklin and Marcus Ferrell and Stephen Janis for stopping by for a difficult. It's always hard to talk about these things, Neill. And when you just said, there's going to be more after Jacob Blake and Trayford Pellerin, and that's a very sad reality. But they, when I say they, I mean the powers that be, better be ready because people are out here ready to burn the shit down. So they can keep shooting us if they want to. They better not. They better make sure the insurance premiums is paid up on all their property because the people are fed up. And I'm so encouraged and enthusiastic about the young people, especially, even though Marcus was out here trying to shade the baby boomers, but that's okay. Shout out to Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, and the boomers. We're out here trying to make this world a better place. Thank you guys for stopping by and participating in the conversation. Gang, we will see you for the next episode of Stir Crazy on Thursday. So you guys have a great, wonderful rest of your Tuesday evening. Okay, see you later. Bye.